And so welcome everybody. And I hope you had time to take a look at the Cynthia Sharp uh, podcast or transcript of that podcast, loosely edited. What I propose that we do is I have some talking points that I've just quickly summarized on Sharp's comments that I thought were most interesting. And then I thought we would discuss those points, and raise questions or thoughts about how our reactions. And then let me pull up my talking points here. I think the first item, and thank you, I see Dennis has joined us, so we will get our overview of the. Perhaps Dennis, you want to do that at the beginning, just so we don't forget about it. And Dennis will present a overview of the HPAC conference, a very exciting online conference that's going to be happening quite soon.
Yes, Ron, it'll just take me a moment to make my update on that. The preparations for our conference are nearly finalized right now, and that is on October the 15th and 16th. It's called the Global Heating Emergency, Preventing 2 Degrees. What's the plan? And we've managed to get a stellar lineup of renowned speakers for the event. We're getting a lot of kudos from people for the individuals that we've attracted to speak and discuss at the conference. The latest projections, show that temperatures are now likely to breach 2 degrees by the late 2030s. And this is the basic issue that we want to address in this conference. The audience for the conference is going to include the negotiating teams of the 195 countries, delegations to the COP. So we hope to be able to influence some of them to begin to look outside the box and begin getting outside of their infinite loop of negotiations on topics that are really quite insubstantial to our current crisis. We also anticipate a lot of participation from UN agencies, staff, and other multilateral institutions, as well as extensive engagement from broader global audiences, particularly in the Global South. So we'll have online presentations, and we will also and participation, and we'll also be sharing the recordings of the entire conference with thousands of people who will be invited but unable to personally attend the meeting. And we've got publicity going out already to thousands over LinkedIn, Facebook, and email contacts databases that we've got a mass mailing system for that. So please register and publicize the conference through your social media platforms, your email contacts. And if you've got extensive databases of contacts like I do, I've got about 5,000, and you don't want to send one out individually to each of them, you could send us email contacts and we'll put them into our mass mailings. My second announcement, and this is really hot news, Ron, is that I'm delighted to inform you all that the HPAC now has a second national affiliated organization. The Healthy Planet Action Philippines Initiative is an NGO that's just been registered in the Philippines by a group of my Filipino colleagues. And the CEO is Dr. Delia Katkutan, who is an HPAC member. You haven't seen too much of her on the sessions because, of course, the timing of these sessions is 5:30 a.m. where I live, and that's a bit tough for anyone but a diehard like myself. But I'll be looking forward to having Delia join us in a session coming up sometime soon, so that she can talk about her vision for a national affiliate. I mentioned it was the second because the first one I consider Healthy Climate Initiative of our good friend Sumitra Das. So thanks, Ron. I'll pass it back to you.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. Yeah, no, that is great news on both fronts. Really excellent news. Uh, and I do want to. We do have a couple of the Blue Cooling Initiative and the Rebrightening, and also as affiliates. Greg, did you wanted to make a comment?
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, congratulations on pulling that meeting together. It sounds like it's going to be very valuable. I've registered. I've tried. Wasn't sure whether there was an in-person portion of this, and then and a virtual. Or is it entirely virtual?
It's entirely virtual. Yes.
Okay, yeah,
It's
yeah.
all on. Yeah.
And the other question was, do you have any idea whether any or how many of these whatever number of hundreds of representatives you've invited, is there some chance that some of these people will actually attend?
I think there is. Each of the delegations to the COP has anywhere from 15 to 50 people in it, you see.
Yeah.
And I have the email address of the representative that's registered with the UNFCCC, and I'm encouraging the people that I email the announcement to share it with their group, and that could mean that one or more people from each delegation could be joining. But I will probably have no way of knowing how many will be until we get the registrations accumulated. Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds great.
And I put the website for the conference in the chat, so anyone who's looking for that can pick that up and look at. Oh, Robert also put it in as well.
It's already. It's good
already
to
there.
That's okay. It's okay. We got multiple options there.
The website looks great, actually. I thought very well done, professional looking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let us move on. That's all very exciting news, and I think it's quite relevant to the discussion we're proposing to have today. Let me pull up my little notes here. If there's still, yes, there we go. Wow. Usually I have to search for things ad nauseum. There we go. So these are my my short notes. I've been telling people that I'm at this music conference, so I may not be totally coherent, but I think I'm in pretty good shape, surprisingly. So this is the talking points. I hope people had a chance to listen to that interview with Pete Irvine. It says Cynthia Sharf on climate governance, or SRM governance. And an excellent podcast. And I took the liberty of, just letting it transcribe and editing that slightly. So it's not an official, I wouldn't call it official copy, but it has, her major points. And then these are the things that I kind of pulled out that I thought were of particular interest. She has had a long history, as I put in the announcement. She has worked at the highest levels of the UN, with international leaders and policymakers, particularly from the governance side. That is her expertise. So I think she is a very good person to provide some insight on what policymakers. She worked with what is it, C2G2? I think that they had a initiative that was actually going around talking to policymakers in private and conversing with them about intervention, about climate intervention, to see where they stand and what they know and what they didn't know. And she was one of the lead people for that initiative. So she has a very much of I believe, an insider, an informed view on what people are thinking, policy leaders around the world. So her conclusions, and I think Pete Irvine, who I'm sure you all know, or I assume you do, climate scientist who's now working with the University of Chicago climate. It's a SR climate intervention initiative led by David Keith. And he is also, I think, the lead, what it's called, the policy editor or whatever of SRM 360. So he's one of the people that got, I assume, got that going as well. And I think he has some really good questions. So the points I thought were of particular interest with the graph, she noticed that, this first one will not be a particular surprise to any of us, that there's a huge gap between what climate scientists, those of us who are engaged in this area, are learning and, about this issue and what policymakers typically know. She says, they have snippets of information and they often, it leads to misleading conclusions. So this is something that, of course, is really important to try and do what we can to address this gap. She says, how should I just review all these and then we can open up the floor, or should we stop? Maybe that's the best thing to do, because it'll give people a little bit of time to think about some of this. She noticed a particular lack of trust, particularly in the global South, and particularly after not achieving the 100 billion Green Climate Fund goal. That was sort of the Paris Agreement alternative to the Kyoto Accord that was had actually transferred over 300 billion from North to South countries through those cap and trade, the global cap and trade initiative that, of course, the U.S. never joined. So the U.S. was not part of that, and which I always like to note that the EU continued. The EU still has an EU cap and trade, as do some regions within the US and other parts of the world. But the EU is the only country that's actually reduced emissions, even if you take into account outsourcing and a little slower growth than the US during the period from 1990. So that's there. I can share some of that. This was supposed to be the alternative, and it hasn't worked. The purely voluntary donations, not part of a kind of mandatory cap and trade agreement, are not raising a lot of money. It's woefully below the 100 billion, as I recall, and just like the voluntary national determined commitments are not particularly being very effective at driving emission reduction or drawdown. Okay. So the next one is, who the global South trusts. Again, these are sort of, not too surprising. They would trust their own people. They next would trust international organizations like IPCC and WMO. And last, and she kind of emphasizes, they are not inclined to, at least in her experience, listen to, climate scientists, even eminent climate scientists from elite universities in the global North. They have a certain kind of distrust of that has a long history of behind it. She talks repeatedly about, we have to point out that what we're trying to do is save lives and mitigate suffering. It's kind of an obvious point, but I think we kind of get lost in all the kind of climate details that are, of course, extremely important and lead to we believe will lead to great suffering and human lives lost, as well as other species. And but she says, for politicians, the human dimension, the social dimension is really key, and not surprising. And on this point, she notes, and this is something relevant to the conference that Dennis has been organizing, Dennis and colleagues, that the focus, the mind, what the really, she comes back to this, and I thought it was really interesting that's exactly what this conference is aiming to do, is to focus attention, concentrate and focus attention. Look, we're passing 2.0 probably in around the 2040s or earlier. And, this is, we have to do something now. We don't have time to play games and play politics. We need action, very quick action. This is a crisis. So she sort of agrees with that. I mean, she not in those specific terms that I mentioned in relating to this conference, but she does agree that the focus on intervention has that ability to make this more immediate. That this is not the emissions reduction and carbon removal that will take decades. We all know it's going to take decades. That we can kind of push down the road and claim is not that important. Is not that's. And Mike may have something to say about what he has learned about how politicians are thinking about that. This is a problem that people just don't understand the urgency. They don't see this as immediate as something that requires, urgent action. And in 6 kind of relates to 4, in addition to just generally focusing on lives and suffering, it is important also to drill it down further to what's going to happen to your country, your region. What are the scenarios that will affect you politically? And she does note that there's the Arctic region is of particular interest, both for climate reasons, as we know, because it's warming so quickly, 4 times at least faster than the mid-latitudes, and the effects are so apparent. So there's a lot going on, as some of you may have seen in recent posts on the Operatio Arctis folks and the papers from Moore et al. That are talking about how they have really been working in the Arctic, the Sami Council and some of the the institutions up in the Arctic to try and make this a focus. That an intervention is really the only way to try and restore the Arctic or save the Arctic. And so it's one of the proposals that we proposed as well in our paper, the HPAC climate cooling paper. We said one of the scenarios is a coalition of the willing to sort of try and do a save the poles, because ultimately you have to do both poles, but along the lines of saving the Great Barrier Reef, that has been quite successful, at least politically, in Australia, in that it has not engendered a huge political pushback, because I think Australians want to save the Great Barrier Reef. They realize that this is something that they don't want to lose. She notes that this is kind of interesting. She said trusted monitoring. So she notes that outdoor experiments make it real. So why all the efforts at intervention, the moment they start designing an outdoor experiment, even if it's a trivial, has trivial impact in real terms, like the spice experiment or other efforts, it really will have puts out less SO2 than an airplane. They have a really hard time. In the past, they have had a hard time getting that accepted, getting political acceptance for those. And she says, yeah, that's it's doing computer modeling and so forth is a much easier lift. It's not that problematic, especially if it's transparent and widely shared. But the moment you start talking about outdoor experiments, the whole idea of SRM becomes real to politicians, and they know it becomes real to their constituents. So it becomes a much more controversial kind of thing to get acceptance for. She says in that line, so you also need trusted messengers, and on that notion, it would be better not single nations, if at all possible, coalitions of nations with transparent, working transparently and having kind of independent monitoring capability or international monitoring capability. And her group right now, it's interesting. She's working for I think it's called the generational. I put it in the promotion. But it's like a Ministry of the Future. Those who read, Ministry of the Future the book. This is a European agency that has a similar title. It's sort of trying to address
The
the
Center for the Future Generations,
what's it called?
CFG. Center for the Future Generation.
Yeah, for the future
CFG.
generations. Yes, exactly. So I think it is interesting. It kind of that's the like that ministry of the future. And finally, interesting at the very end, she says, in her view, and this is interesting because we had this discussion with David Keith, as many of you recall, it's been a while, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago. And David, of course, is a leader on SAI, has been for a long time, has done, critical work in bringing attention to that and trying to move that forward, particularly just for research initially, because people didn't want to talk about it at all. But in our discussion with David, he was really quite dismissive of the 1.5 threshold. Now we're looking at 2.0 as well. And when we were saying, look, David, we can't wait for decades for more research. We really have to, because we're hitting these thresholds. He basically viewed them more as political thresholds. It's not real, not that. At least not something that he was at the time particularly concerned about. So I think that's fair to say from that. You can look at the video of the David Keith talking to HPAC at the time. It was a very interesting conversation. But Sharf, Cynthia Sharf is, I don't know if she's seen that, but she is, her thinking is that tipping points are a better focus. They're real, they're something that is actually scary. I mean, she says this is people that know if you know what's going on in the planet and you're not scared about it, you don't really understand the seriousness. I mean, she does make those kind of statements that, and one of the things that is really, I think we can all agree. The risk of tipping points. I mean, it's just it really is some of them, many of them, some of them are irreversible on human timescales, and so we are literally kind of destroying our planet for future generations by not acting. And many of the SRM the SRM studies are now saying, the faster we do this, the earlier we do this, the more likely we are to reduce the risk of some of these tipping points, or at least reduce their harm, the magnitude of what will happen. Some of them are probably already, there's not much we can do about already. So that's it. I think those are, that was my take on the major, the points that I thought were most interesting. And I thought what we would do is, just open it up to discussion. I mean, how do we think? Do we agree with Cynthia Sharp on these points? Do we think they are credible? And then the second question is, what would be the best? What can we do to move forward? I mean, to address some of these issues, because this really is key. I mean, if we're going to get intervention, particularly of the kind near-term cooling that a bunch of us have been working on in particular, we're going to we need to think about how this is going to happen and how we at least try to make it happen in a more politically consensual way, in a way that more people in the world can understand and support. So with that, I'll stop and open it up to questions. I don't know if I should leave this up here. I guess you could. I guess it'd be nice for us to see each other. I can pull it up if people want to see it again, or if it's helpful.
Put it into the chat, Ron.
Well, I need to create a. Okay, let me work on that. I can do that, but I need to create a link to do that. Uh, I will work on that.
Can't you paste it?
I'm sorry?
Just copy it, Ron.
Copy and paste
We'll
into
put the whole thing in the chat. Okay, that's an idea. Yeah. It'll be a little bit more difficult, but yeah, good idea. Okay, let me do that. Copy it. Stop share. I will put that in the chat. And in the meantime, oh, good. We have a whole bunch. Let me just put this in here so people can see it.
Just like to shout out to Paul Beckwith. Nice to see you here, Paul. Been very much enjoying your regular YouTube commentaries on the latest climate science.
Yes, Paul. Okay, so
yeah, thank
yes,
you.
I
I'm
agree. It's great to
listening,
see
but
Paul.
I'm doing multiple things, and there's noise in the background, so I'm just hiding myself. So hi, everybody.
However you can participate is it's good to see you, Paul. Let's start. I think my list. Usually Zoom has the order here, so my order here is Greg, Robert, Rebs.
Sumitra was
correct?
first.
I'm sorry?
Sumitra was first.
Huh. Okay.
Sumitra, Robert, and
track,
then me.
Robert, do you want to? I don't know what the order was. I have it. Usually it lines up.
Sumitra was first, then Robert, then me, then Dennis, and then the others.
Okay. So why don't we go in that order? So Sumitra, let me write that. Sumitra, Robert, Greg, then I assume Rebs, then maybe Mike, and then Dennis. Is that about right? Okay. Oh, Dennis, Mike, you're muted. Okay. Well, so let's start with Sumitra.
Thank you, Ron. It was a good, the talk that Cynthia gave with actually good interview with Peter. I know Cynthia. I met Cynthia in Cape Town, and since then I've been talking with her. She's wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you could, whatever you could do. Yeah, I have a hard time, I have this air conditioning blasting away here but my hearing is not too great, but go ahead. Yeah. The closer you could get and the louder would be better, and the slower probably.
Okay. So I have been talking to Cynthia for several months. She's a wonderful person to talk to and good person. About her, I pretty much agree with her. In my experience with working with the policymakers in the US, I find it that to get to the policymakers, there's several things I think very important. It's very difficult for scientists or the people with deeply in technical work to communicate to the policy makers, primarily because they are trained to use a language. That language is not very transparent to the people, meaning the policymakers. That's number one. Second part is that for the scientists and economists and the people I work with, I see that they are not very definite in the strategic format. They are a lot more under different conditions this will happen. They are not going to be very definite. Policymakers want a very definite answer. Scientists are not willing to give that number or whatever that they ask. So those are the two things I see that for the communication piece from between the policymakers and the technocrats. Second thing I have noticed my work in India, primarily engaging with the people, policymakers, and all, including academia, that the knowledge of SRM.
Sumitra, I'm sorry. Can you just? So you said there are two things you've outlined two major points, and I'm not sure. So the first was the gap, the knowledge gap. Was that it?
Now, the first part, the communication between the scientists or the technical people and the policymakers, there is a gap between them because
Okay.
of it is very difficult for scientists to communicate to them, meaning the policymakers in this case. Difficulty is the style of communications is different. Um, they want more simplicity and more definite than the scientist would like to present the thing to them. That's number one. And often in my own experience, I see they lose the those technical people, meaning the policymakers, or the other way around when they present it. So that's number one. I see that. Second piece, I see there is a huge knowledge gap in the global south, particularly from Indian context, definitely among the policymakers, but also in among the people in the influencers. I mean, some there you need to have the influencer that is going to influence the policymaker. Among the influencers, also there. And the third part, the distrust. Now, the distrust part is happening more and more, and I think we should be paying very close attention to this. And I know from Indian context uh, that US today, I mean now, in the past it was different, but in since this current administration, and more so after the tariffs, US has not looked at very positive light. There is a huge amount of media that is, putting lots of spewing lots of negative things about the US. So when US goes and talks to about anything, and then the head it goes again. The US is coming. They do not the trust factor. They have lost it. We have lost it. So these are the few things that come to mind. And I think Cynthia, whatever that interview she said, hit the right, on the head of the nail. So that's
Yeah,
my
thank you.
general
I'm sorry. I think that the sound is really distorted. I'm getting it very distorted, so it's hard. But I think I got most of your points. And I think I just the interview I think was before Trump was elected, if I recall the date. So when she talks about the U.S. in the interview, she was before the current calamitous shift in policy occurred. Okay, next is Robert.
Yeah, look, I think this is a really good conversation to have, and really appreciate that we have this discussion. Now, I had a look at the transcript and just made a couple of points that I'd like to draw attention to. Just firstly, the reaction of people within the IPCC, that she describes the sense of failure, that they've been working towards a goal of emission reduction for so many years, and it's not living up to what it's promised. And so she suggests that it's a rational reaction to try to hang on to that failed goal, but that just doesn't make any sense. And she comments that it's about personal psychology and professional identities, but really, the future of the Earth is more important than those. And I found her discussion about the how to achieve the conversation between policymakers and science people really interesting. Just the observation that policymakers don't view climate in isolation and need to integrate it with the whole security and economic context, and that's a really important point. And just being able to respect policymakers in their situation is in a context where we're going to surpass the Paris Agreement by 100% is her term. And so it's a grim future. She comments that the benefits of sunlight reflection tend not to be mentioned in the conversation, that there's this overwhelming focus on the the negative focus on risks, and so just how very unbalanced that that conversation is. Uh, she took a list of questions directly from policymakers on what they want to know to people in the research community, and it's interesting that how there was a sense that that conversation was something new and innovative when it should just be quite routine. She gives a really interesting example of comparing the impacts of sunlight reflection to the impacts of Facebook, and saying that if we had known the impacts of Facebook, then we would have regulated it far harder at the start, but that we would, given the likely benefits of solar radiation, that we ought to be proceeding much faster. And I really liked the point of finding trusted messengers and voices, and especially my view is that within the faith community, that's something that's quite possible. And my experience there is that the whole faith community is totally consumed by emission reduction alone, or among the progressive side of the faith community. And there's just a very strong emotional blockage to this whole topic of global thinking and sunlight reflection. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. That was a really, really nice summary, and I think you did, nicely raise some of the some of her points, her really interesting points. Let's see, Greg.
Thanks. Yeah, I have to admit I didn't listen to the interview, but just based on your points, I just, there's a few things I would say. One is, I mean, there's still, she mentions, I'm just looking at your list really quick. The lack of trust, I'm not sure what is going to overcome that. And, because nations follow their interests, and then in terms of the funding that has not shown up. I mean, I think the levels that have been bandied about, we need to be putting globally, by putting $1 trillion a year into the global, to the global south or whatever, in order for them to leapfrog, into to a renewable situation. And I don't think those things aren't going to happen. So if the global south strategy is, we're going to hold out on SRM until you guys cough up $1 trillion a year, that ain't going to happen. So I in some sense, I get the idea that that's the case, that their strategy is, we don't want to endorse cooling because then they're never going to give us the $1 trillion. I mean, it's another one of these moral hazard arguments. So I think, again, this is a problem. And then in terms of you need to have, you essentially need to bring everyone on board before you even do experiments. This will, I mean, I just don't see what is going to happen to convince, to get unanimity or even a consensus around doing experiments, other than just pain and suffering. I mean, I think the only thing that's moved us so far, regardless of what we've done, is pain and suffering. So if we wait long enough, things will get horrible enough, and then they'll be willing to try anything. But we really don't want to go that way. But that, so far, I think that's what's pushed the needle at all. So I just don't know. I mean, for me, I think it's going to have to be, particularly the initial experiments are going to have to be unilateral. She mentions that that it's outdoor outdoor experiments are what make it real. And I agree with that. You have to put tons in the stratosphere or whatever you want to do, whatever it's MCB or whatever. You have to do large scale experiments, and that's the only thing that's going to make it a real thing. But but she doesn't seem to provide a way to get to those real world experiments other than anybody else, which is we have to get everybody's buy-in. So, I mean, even absolutely inconsequential in terms of downside effects of real world experiments are not possible at this point because we require a total consensus on this. So now there are experiments being done with a small scale and grassroots things, but I'm talking about large scale, particularly in the way of SAI. Even if you can put, given that we put 100 million tons of SO2 down low in populated areas that really is killing people, and nobody's campaigning against that. If you put a kiloton in the stratosphere, diluted over the size, and it rains out as H2SO4 or whatever, that's going to have immeasurably small effect on anything. And that's one of the reasons why some scientists, including David Keith, say, it's not even, there's no point to doing something like a kiloton experiment because you can't measure. Well, that's fine. Then it's completely innocuous by everybody's claim. But what you do is you put facts on the ground. Once we actually start doing experiments, now instead of having a global ban on any experiment whatsoever, which is their strategic advantage as they see it, I'm talking about the enemies of any cooling. Once you've started doing that, they have to negotiate now. Now it's time. Now they have to negotiate. They can't just forbid. And so, I mean, I don't see anything in the points here that gives us a path to getting permission for even totally innocuous experiments like the one that I'm backing in the Antarctic or whatever, which is, I think, so for the one thing I'm advocating is that even the small scale by full operational deployment standards experiments, doing those is the fastest way to bring it in, to force the world to deal with the inevitability of cooling of all these methods. That's the one thing. And the other is you're going to have to do it on your own. So I'm actually in favor of unilateral experiments, small scale experiments, and not really to cool the Earth, but cool it infinitesimally, possibly, but to put facts on the ground or in the stratosphere or wherever, to force the issue to be dealt with seriously. That's the quickest way to do that. Anyway, that's what I was going to say in response.
Yeah,
Thanks.
So, thank you, Greg. I think so it's kind of the make sunset strategy that in a way, but you want
right. But make sunset isn't a joke. They're putting grams up. I'm talking about kilotons.
I know. Yeah. So the other, I don't think she's saying you need. She's saying that if the regional experiments, you need the consent of the people that are in us. Credibly going to have some kind of impact from your experiment or something like that. I don't think she's saying you need, but anyway, we can debate that.
But I mean, my argument is, Ron, that there's no. What? I don't think any experiment, even a much larger experiment that's being done, will have any impact on anyone yet. It will be, and in fact, you can look. So I mean, there aren't these impacts. If a requirement is you get the permission of anybody who it impacts, that's nobody, because we can have experiments of pretty large scale.
She notes that. She notes that, and she makes she said, but the politicians, that's not the issue. It's not rational necessarily. It's politics. So Rebs.
Yes, the main thing I wanted to say is that Cynthia Sharf has got a narrative, and she's trying to use a narrative about why SRM is needed, which is a good thing compared with, I looked at the UNEP webinar on SRM, and it was all about the technology and basically why not to do it. It wasn't a story about we need to do it because of the triad, because emissions reduction isn't working fast enough. It was focused only on SRM. And when somebody said risk, then the negative risks got elevated kind of thing. So I'm really basically saying that Cynthia Sharp has done an excellent job of trying to put this in context, that it's not only about the technology itself, it's about why we need it and what happens if we don't do it.
Ron, you're muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebs. I agree. I obviously was very impressed by her thinking and ability to communicate her thinking. Mike. You're muted, Mike.
Yeah, I think Dennis was in line, so why don't you go to Dennis first?
Oh, okay. Dennis. Dennis?
Right.
You're muted.
Yes.
Oh, there you
go. I just wanted to mention that since I, among others, were very impressed with Cynthia Sharf's vision and her extremely articulate and balanced views, I reached out to her just a couple of days ago to explore whether she might want to be a panel member in the governance session of the Global Online Conference. And so I'm hoping that she will accept that invitation and join us there to as we try to sort out the way forward in governance of a new global plan. So that's all I wanted to contribute, and hopefully we'll hear more from her during the conference.
Excellent, Dennis. Yeah, no, that's great news. I really hope that she can join us. I think she would be a real a valuable contributor to that conference. Mike.
Okay. Yeah, I have several comments to make. I think on the first point about difference between scientists and policymakers, I think that's really is important to get at. So I don't know how many of you know, but this past Sunday night, I got a call asking if I would be a substitute for a person who dropped out in a panel before a House hearing on weather modification and climate intervention that was by the committee that was chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was called the Doge Committee about government efficiency. Why it was before that committee, I don't know. But she's absolutely opposed to putting anything in the atmosphere. The interesting thing was, at the same time the hearing was going on, there was another hearing about what DOE was deregulating, and the bill she had put forward was a bill for for EPA to actually do some regulation. So it was a little in contrast. But the other panelists with me that the Republicans had chosen included Roger Pilkey Jr. and another fellow. And
Mike, just for our the DOE's Department of Environment. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, Environmental Protection Agency. I meant, yeah. The was Roger Pilkey Jr. and another one, Chris Moritz, who's a young meteorologist, both who were sort of wanting to insist that one had to have, absolute certainty before one even considered intervention. And so they were even, stronger on that than typical scientists are. So I think that issue is really a good one. Is figuring out what language and what decision framework to be using on that kind of thing. On this issue of trust, it seems to me that I'm not sure it's distrust so much as that those of us in mid-latitudes come to our experience is so completely different than what it is in the South that we make assumptions that we don't even think about. And so this idea that those of us in the global North who have money for air conditioning and other things, should be making decisions about what one does about intervention on cooling for those in the global South who don't have the resources to have air conditioning, and as Sumitra has pointed out, sometimes in India, have 70% of the people or something have outdoor jobs, and 70% of the buildings or something lack air conditioning. And there's just no way to think about conceivably getting enough air conditioning so that people in the global South can survive the heat waves and the wet bulb temperature getting up over 30 degrees Celsius or something and approaching 35 where you practically can't live outdoors. And so I think rather than distrust, we should actually be thinking and defining what that means and stuff. One of the very strange things that happened, maybe, what was it, yesterday, was the National Academy of Science offered its views on EPA and the endangerment finding. And I don't know how many of you listened to that, but I was taken aback right at the start by what they said was, we're going to look at only aspects of this that pertain to people in the United States specifically, and give no consideration. They gave no consideration at all to the fact that the U.S. has a global fingerprint and that Americans live around the world and are occupied in things along the world. And presumably EPA has responsibility for thinking about not just Americans in the U.S., and not only in the trust territories and everything, but I thought it was kind of crazy. It was an example of sort of not giving deference and also attention to the global South.
Mike, I'm sorry, could you just, are you talking about, I did see something about the panel of deniers was dismissed, but I don't think that's what you're talking about.
No, I'm not talking about that.
The Academy published a 350-page document in response to the administration's report that downplayed climate change, right, Mike?
No, well, there's two things. So for the Department of Energy, which had asked these 5 climate deniers to put its report together, and then there were all these scientific rebuttals to the report. Well, it turned out they were actually violating the law and they were sued. They had formed something that would normally be called and covered under the Federal Advisory Committee Act. And that has various procedures, and having been involved in a federal advisory committee for the national assessment when we got sued about it, improperly so, but we got sued about it. What DOE did instead was just say, oh, well, we'll dismiss the group and we'll not count them. That group has said, however, they are going to respond to the comments that came in. But that's the Department of Energy. Quite separately from that, the Environmental Protection Agency had decided, it has been making regulations that depend on what's called the endangerment finding, which was prepared in 2009 after the 2007 Supreme Court decision that counted CO2 as a pollutant. And so the Republican approach is to say, well, the way to get rid of all the EPA regulations rather than try and repeal them is we'll repeal the endangerment finding. We will say that things haven't happened the way the endangerment finding was written originally, and there's some things the trends have changed, partly in response to actions being taken by the U.S. and other countries. And so there's been a lot of comments going in on that proposed ruling by EPA and the National Academy of Sciences, which is charged legally by, EPA is charged to pay attention from things that come from the National Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences chose on its own to prepare a quick report with respect to the endangerment finding, and that report says the health situation's gotten worse, the environment situation's gotten worse, and a whole bunch of things justifying the endangerment finding. So they put it out, but all they considered was what was happening to people in the United States. And you go, that just seems to me very narrow thinking. Now, I know they had to do it fast and their rules don't allow very broad things sometimes, but it was just amazing that they didn't consider about what would happen to the U.S. Given all the things we import from abroad, from food or health or commercial products or you name it. It just didn't talk about there being an international community. So
this was the NSA report that did not.
The issue
NSA
of
report.
Yeah, now you still have a chance, I think, up till September 22nd to offer comments to EPA on its proposed withdrawal of the endangerment finding. On this issue of experiments, I think we do need to figure out something. Greg made it, I think, a good point, but I think we need to say, first of all, that we don't need to experiments on whether it's going to work or not. The approaches we are all taking have already been proven by nature. And all that we're really doing is optimizing and adjusting reports of things that have been done by nature, whether it's volcanic eruptions. And so instead of doing one big one, we're going to spread it out in time, or instead of, this hearing had a lot on weather modification because of this fear. The title of the thing had, violating God's wonderful environment or something, but had to do with trying to take water out of the atmosphere, get rainmaking, for example, by cloud seeding. And there was mention, we've already had these experiments by the University of Washington. They were going to do this or that. All they were going to do was try and do something that would keep the raindrops in the atmosphere, not pull them out. They wanted to form raindrops and stuff. So there seems to be no appreciation of what's going on. And this Marjorie Taylor Greene, who made some statements, you can find, I guess I can put the link to the hearing in the chat.
Yeah.
Had no idea, no sense of doing relative risk and trying to decide anything. It was just rather appalling. So I think we really need to think about, as Greg was saying, that most of these small experiments have, nothing to do really with trying to be geoengineering. They have to do with trying to do some engineering things, learn about the atmosphere, learn how something spreads or something like that. But to call them geoengineering experiments is just, I think, a misnomer. So I'll stop there. I think I have other comments, but I think our notion about focus on saving lives and mitigating suffering, a good way to put it is we want to keep the sustainable development goals being plausible. Right now they're becoming less and less plausible. So that's just sort of another way of saying it.
I'd like to pick up on that theme of mitigating suffering and saving.
Hold on, Robert, 1 second. Mike, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Go ahead, Rob.
I just had a quick
Thank you.
one-sentence comment. I really liked what Mike had framed as weather moderation and or weather modification, and I just want to second that framing as being an effective framing going forward that's worked for decades in places like Los Angeles, where they've been doing cloud seeding, et cetera, for decades.
Yeah, there's no scientific agreement that even works. You can't prove it does work, and you can't prove it doesn't work.
But it's politically acceptable
Sort
for
of
decades.
erratic, and that's because of the scientific standard is so high that you can't get either way.
It's sufficiently politically acceptable to be advanceable. And so I think we should build upon that and actually improve the marine clouds that can help them see it.
The EPA website on their webpage on geoengineering is interesting to look at. And if you look at it, they have compiled a list of all the reports of weather modification and cloud seeding in the United States. And it's much larger than people have thought it is. It's quite an amazing list. Whether it actually works or not is all in the minds of the beholding group that is doing it. And it's mostly done at the county level. And one of the proposals of Roger Pilkey Jr. is there should be a national standard on what all the states consider and stuff. And you go, that's pretty crazy, especially crazy for Republicans to be proposing, about putting in these rules about federal standard compared to states' rights or local rights. But
yeah.
So if I come back to Cynthia Sharf's discussion, and I think
Robert, one second. Can I just? I did listen to Mike's that whole hearing, and I think that Mike mentioned this, but the incredible hypocrisy of having this whole hearing as part of the first it was part of the Doge. That was the charge of the subcommittee, Doge, and so they Marjorie Taylor Greene brings in contrails, becomes part of the topic, and contrails and geoengineering, and then the whole hearing, the Republicans are pushing, we need to regulate this, we need to ban this. At the same time as the other hearing going on, they want to do away with all EPA regulations of environmental climate regulation. So it was just it's just quite a spectacle, I gotta say. Anyway, Robert, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I think the key takeout from the Cynthia Sharp conversation is that restoring planetary albedo, rebrightening the planet, is a primary moral issue of our time. That the suffering that will be caused by failing to engage on planetary reflectivity is absolutely vast. And so this is as a moral issue, it is equally a religious issue. And yet the religious community have been missing in action on this. They have by and large, a quite misguided climate ideology that is focused on the, I suppose, seemingly legitimate topic of climate justice. And yet there is no critical path to achieve the climate justice theory that underpins the work of religious climate activists who are advocating for emission reduction alone. And it just occurs to me that if you think back to the 1960s in the USA and the civil rights debate, the thing that really catalyzed a popular recognition of the civil rights of Black Americans was the religious framing that Martin Luther King was able to achieve. He was able to say that reading the Bible requires us to honor the equal dignity of all human beings, and that was such a shaming message to the racist faith of the white community that people were not able to stand against that message. And my view is that a very similar religious agenda is required on climate to present geoengineering as a moral absolute, as something that is urgently needed to stop the sixth extinction, which is the greatest crime happening on Earth, and that there is an immense biblical basis for this. Now, I draw particular attention to the line in the Bible that the wrath of God is against those who destroy the earth. That's Revelation 11:18. What an amazing statement, where you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who is saying, let's continue to destroy the earth, and I'm a Christian. What a hypocrite. You know, it's just And then there are abundant other lines, especially the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the meek. I mean, who is meek? Who is more meek than the whole of wild nature? And they shall inherit the earth. You know, it's not going to be the rich and powerful. It is the meek. And so there's a whole Christian dimension, an apocalyptic dimension as well. The four horsemen of the apocalypse are really marching. And so this is a theme, I think, that comes out of Sharf's discussion. But part of the problem is that the scientific community is quite hostile to religion, because religion is, by and large, such a fantasy world. The scientific community just view it with some level of disdain. And so there's a need to integrate religion and science, faith and reason, and open up that as a conversation. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I should say.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead. I saw you. Go ahead. Mike, just a response to Robert, and then I see Brian has his hand up. Go ahead, Mike.
Let me just say one thing about it. So it's important to understand for this hearing that it came, a part of it was driven by the fact that there was cloud seeding going on within a day or two, 200 miles from where the Texas floods started and killed all those people. And several members of the subcommittee were representatives from Texas. Okay, so it's not thought that particular cloud seeding it's not thought by scientists that particular cloud seeding could have affected something where it happened. But there is this sort of conspiracy theory growing that cloud seeding has caused terrible kinds of things. So one of the things I tried to mention was that these atmospheric rivers that cause that kind of event are caused by, on the one hand, by warming oceans and warming waters. I didn't have to say Gulf of America, but that was what was a little bit of something we talked about. Would I have to do that? But they're also occurring around the world. So if you look at what happened in Pakistan, or you look at what's happened in India, or you look at what happens when atmospheric rivers hit California, the warmer waters are putting together things, and particular weather events come together and they shoot all this water in at a mountain range or a mesa or an elevation lift. And with warmer temperatures, you get that much more moisture dumped on the systems. And the natural channels and the flood control things just can't handle it. And so you get these very damaging floods and lots of people losing their lives. It's sort of a consequence that we can try and explain, but so it's trying to explain some of the feelings they have and the events they're having in scientific terms. So,
yeah, no,
that was part of the drama for the hearing.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, and I got to say, in spite of the Republican witnesses saying no, that is the science behind that, cause and effect just isn't credible.
They said it wasn't the case. But, yeah.
That was so, but that kind of gets to Robert's point that these sort of the core beliefs of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, she is an outlier even in the U.S., though to her credit, she does have some. Appears to have principles. She acknowledged that there is genocide happening in Gaza, that people are starving, or at least she said people are starving, and that the Epstein files have to be released. So she's a little bit.
I should say also that the bill she proposes is that anything put into the atmosphere with intent to change the weather or climate should be banned and criminalized. And you say, well, that's very interesting, but if you inadvertently put it in the atmosphere like CO2, that doesn't count. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
which is not exactly inadvertent.
Intentional putting it in that counts. Not so. Yeah. So misting moisture in hot cities or in amusement parks to cool the air is criminal. would be criminal under her law the way it's set. So yeah.
We just need
Okay,
It's
to,
nowhere
thank
near
you.
getting passed, but whatever.
Brian, you had
yeah, we just need to demonstrate intent, state or local intent other than geoengineering. I note with interest, I did look that up, Mike. It's very interesting to see that a dozen states, and mostly in the West, have programs. And when you go onto the NOAA website, which I can include here, there's 1,113 weather modification entries. They're required to
Yeah.
document what they're doing. But this is a great precedent. I think we should just dive right into weather modification and weather moderation, and and just augment the programs that have been going on since the 1970s in the case of Southern California. I mean, and it's these are like there's a dozen state programs as of July 2024. So I think the writing's on the wall, regional and local, state and county level. Cooling is where it's at, and maybe we need to come up with something like we could be growing seaweed and produce biogenic aerosols. I mean, I think that's a fine thing, and it becomes um, a side effect.
What I tried to differentiate was it's quite hard to prove that you can change a particular weather situation. Affect a hurricane, affect a drought or something, or affect a big storm, an atmospheric river or something. And what the intervention techniques are trying to do is sort of affect the statistics of what is happening over time. So a little bit of effect on a lot of things can change the statistics a little bit, but hard to understand for people. So,
Ron, I'd like to suggest
Go
that,
ahead. Go ahead. No, that's their last word here. I think we have a good segue here to go on to our just a real short discussion of our chart. But go ahead, Robert.
well, there's a number of people who haven't commented in the conversation. So, like if Eric or Paul or Michael or Dennis would like to comment on the conversation, I would be interested in hearing their views.
I'm sorry, Robert. You said there's more people that want to.
No, I said that there are people who haven't commented, and I would be interested in like if.
Oh,
if
okay, sure.
Or wish to comment, I would be interested in hearing views.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So anyone who has not commented want to offer some thoughts?
Yeah, I can.
Eric?
I can give a comment. I've still not figured out here in Zoom how I can raise my hand apart from doing it like this. But no, just more in general, apart from the active cooling, I think there is a lot of hypocrisy around the whole climate discussion, regardless whether people believe or not believe. It's extremely polarized. You're pro or you're anti, and there's no balance anymore. But regardless how we spin it, there's also a very strong economic impact. And I think that's in the end typically something which moves the needle if you convert it to the economic impact and see if you take it on, how you can convert it into an innovation driver, how you can make it a new driver for your economy, and probably not going to affect every country in a similar way, but particularly the richer countries. If you look at Europe, we have to do something. It's not only the climate issue, it's also the dependence issue, geopolitical issue. There's a lot ongoing. And US also has to do and make its actions. The whole world has to make its actions. So if we can make the transition apart from seeing the environmental necessity into making the calculations and convert the story not only as we need to do it because it's healthy, it's green, because frankly, a lot of people simply don't seem to care or are ignorant or are just busy with their own lives and they think, I will outlive it. They're the frogs being warmed up, and by the time it's too hot, it's too late, but they don't realize it. But if they see it's a growth driver, if they can see how they can gain by it, what's in it for me, that's typically for change management what people require. And where we can create, let's say, the carrot instead of the stick to drive people forward, well, let's see how we can do it. But I don't know what kind of data you have on that end.
Yeah, well, I think I got the gist of what you were saying.
This hearing of the subcommittee on delivery on
unfortunately,
government efficiency will come to order.
there's someone.
Welcome, everyone. Without objection,
I'm
the chair
sorry.
may declare recess.
Let me see if I can stop.
I think anyway, it's a broader discussion, but I think one of the problems with the climate, the fundamental problem, of transitioning to a different kind of economy, is something that requires, it really is a political problem. I mean, self-interest is not going to, it in the long run, yes, in the very long run, the market, one can see that we're trending in that direction, but it would take far too long, in terms of climate impact. The climate clock is moving so much faster. So I think we all agree on that. The part that I'm pointing out is, of course, to get those kind of rapid transitions, the only time we've been able to do that in democracies is through basically, kind of wartime economies, emergency boards. And for that, we would need our society, the Democrat. I'm still calling the U.S. democratic, even though it's veering on the edge right now. But would require acknowledging that climate change is just like it's like fighting a war, except the enemy is something we have wrought. It's an enemy we created, but to address it, we need the kind of response we would have to a foreign invader, a human invader, and historically. Anyway, so okay. Someone else, I think. Okay. Yeah, that's a very, it's an important discussion, but it's why we are all supporting cooling, is because I think, thanks, Sumitra. We recognize that the likelihood of that is very slim, and so therefore we need to do something fast, a band-aid, a temporary solution, something just to keep things from completely unraveling and causing enormous, unnecessary harm, while we as humans get our act together to actually do what has to be done here. Okay, so on that note, I think I'll do, as they say in that hearing, with since we have unanimous consent, let me kind of move on. Hearing no objection, let me just go to the just a quick overview of our chart. Yeah, I know. Okay, that won't let me. Okay, so I got to do this separately. Pull up our PowerPoint. As I said, this can be done through the HPAC website. On the bottom, there's a link.
Ron, would it be possible to give Michael a quick comment before you do that?
Sure. Micah, go ahead while I'm working on this.
Okay. I have so much to say that I will write a letter because I can't really encapsulate it. But I'm putting on a Global Earth Repair Convergence in May, which is sort of a follow-up to the conference you're doing. And our focus is going to be on greening the planet, putting carbon in the soil, agroforestry, more clouds in the sky, more transpiration, regulating the climate through hydrology, and holding water in the landscape, and sort of like you might call the nature-based solutions or the natural solutions on land, using water and plants basically to change the climate, because we know we can do it. Whether it's fast enough, of course, is really, if we could get the planet on board, sure, we could do it fast enough. But whether we will is hard to say. I think personally that the opposition to what is typically called geoengineering is so big that it's going to be hard to push to really get it done. Of course, I do like the idea. I think we should really work more on the iron fertilization for phytoplankton more, but that is also a tough sell these days. So I'm just I will put a list of these solutions that I'm nothing new to any of you probably, but I'm going to put together a letter and send it, and maybe Dennis could forward it, and then you can look at it if you please. But yeah, I'm really on board with you in the sense of it doesn't look good, and let's move forward. But I'm going to be promoting the nature-based solutions.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Yeah, it would be interesting to see that. Yeah. Okay, let me go to our oh, darn it. I just had it up. Now it's taking it away from me. Here we go.
Yeah, Sumitra disappeared.
Okay. Now, hopefully, when I try to share this, it will come up. Yes, okay. So these are the PowerPoints that the urgent response group has been working on. And I think, we don't have a lot of time here. So the first slides will be very familiar to most of you. If not, please look at them at your leisure more carefully. But it states the HPAC perspective, in general terms, and then goes into a little bit of detail on the triad. The first few slides deal with the emissions reduction. Then we go to this is not moving along very swiftly. Okay, there we go. So we have emissions reduction, then we go to carbon removal, and we have some language on that. And I think our major contribution, if one could call it that, is to put together a kind of systemic overview of how we think, what are the as of this moment, what are the most plausible methods to get real cooling, global scale cooling within the next by 2050. So within the next 25 years, we set the bar at 20 because we figure, you need to have the method scaled up sufficiently, give it another 5 years of working to actually get some significant cooling. And you will notice that in this matrix, each one of the columns, these are all links. So these links will go to documents that explain the values in the respective columns, both the elaboration on a title, on what the title is, and then explain the values. And the links, the row links here, like I'll just click on one here. So for example, methane reduction is our first item here. And then you get a set of references on that particular approach. Now, what we did is we came up, we first had a cutoff of, something that can be scaled up to global level effect within 20 years. And we ended up with really, 4 major approaches that we thought could have substantial effect on global cooling, and then another 4 that might have, with the potential to have a modest effect by 2050, and then the last 2 unlikely, but we put them in. We didn't think they were likely to be able to cool the planet within 25 years. And then we ordered those. We ordered them first of all by their potential to reduce tipping point risk. So that gets to what Sharf was saying, that tipping points are the thing that will really focus people's minds on the urgency here. And then, and so that within those, so that we have these four here that have substantial potential to reduce tipping point risk. And, Mike was of course, the major, well, I think, the source for much of the technical cutoff, the thresholds here in particular. So 0.5, we determine that 0.5, if something has the potential to cool the planet by 0.5 C, then we're going to say it could actually plausibly reduce, substantial reduction in tipping point risk. So you see that all of these have at least 0.5 of potential magnitude global cooling by 2050. And then within those, and then, the other ones, of course, have, you see here, they have possible ability to impact global cooling by 2050. And then the last two, the other final two, are very unlikely to be able to do that. And then within that ranking, we ordered, this is a kind of lexicographic ordering, we ordered, the next criteria was time. So the fastest ones were put ahead of the slower ones. So that's why methane and methane emissions, we're already working on that. And there's already been global agreements to do that. So we would think that would be something that would be perfectly plausible to be done, let's say within 10 years, to get up to substantial scale methane emissions reduction enough to actually have a real impact on the, reducing the rate of increase of global cooling and hopefully actually get some real cooling if we do that, because methane is a short-term climate driver and it has immediate cooling effects within, it's 8 or 10 years, whatever is the lifetime. There's some debate about its how long, most of it stays up before it decomposes. And then the next one was polar SAI, because we thought you could get that going faster than global SAI. And you certainly want to start slowly and carefully with SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection. But that one, again, you could have up to 0.5 if you just were able to cool the poles. And again, you have to do the poles because you need some symmetry if you're going to have, substantial global cooling in either pole. And then global SAI, within 20 years, we could get 1.5. So this is the big enchilada here, the major approach that will actually deliver significant, 1.5 C of actual cooling within 50 years. And that might, if you take into account the warming that we're likely to experience in those by 2050, we might actually get down to below 1 degree C if we do that. The final method was a little bit more of a, let's see if I can get the link. Yeah, methane removal. So this is one that some of you know, Oswald Peterson has been working on. It's actually not just point source, kind of emission reduction or point source removal. In order to have this have a global effect, you have to actually get this existing methane that's in the atmosphere, much of it actually from nature, the warming that we have already occurred has a feedback effect of causing more natural methane emissions from various sources. And so you have to clean up the atmosphere, actually, substantially reduce the amount of methane in the atmosphere in order for that to actually have up to 0.5 within 20 years. We're sort of giving Oswald a lot of, okay, if you can do that, and not just Oswald, other people are working on this, but we have a set of references there. There's some interesting papers on that. And I think the methane is important, you notice in the top 4, because it merges with emissions reduction. We're saying we're all for emissions reduction. Focus on methane. That's that's the emission reduction that we think should be the highest priority, the highest focus. Not that the other stuff should, not be done. Everything needs, as Alan, as one of the members of our group, is pedal to the metal on all of this stuff. No question. But those are, if we were to do priorities in terms of cooling, that would be it. Then the next 4 are the more possibly. So we have the sulfur, the bunker fuel. We put that in there because the estimate we have here is for 0.2 cooling. If we get the IMO to finally relax its regulations on the high seas and in the Mediterranean, away from populations, perhaps, and the Mediterranean is a little bit smaller of a sea, but they have there's the emission. They have already categorized the high impact areas where we're saying, look, why don't you do your regulations there and not do them in the high seas, and let's at least get some of the cooling we used to have from those phosphate aerosols, and then work on part of our suggestions also to work on tropospheric aerosols that could be released from ships that would not be as harmful to humans and natural species as sulfates.
Ron, we're over
sulfates.
time.
Anyway, that's
so. Jonathan
okay.
wanted to comment. So could I suggest?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just say that. So we have the next one. Let me just say what they are. Reduced black carbon is the other one. Tropospheric aerosols, the one I was just talking about. And then the last one here is rain cloud brightening. So that would be number 8 here. And then the final 2 are reduced deforestation. So that's sort of the green solutions that I think Michael was referring to. And then mirrors, we think, would just take too long. If that could be done, it would take too long. So that's our table. And as Robert says, we are out of time. So let's open it up for comments. I see Sev. Who is first here, Sev or John? Whatever, Sev, go ahead.
Mine's very quick. Can you put the share link to that document you just had open?
Put it up again. Yeah. Okay. Oh, while the folks are speaking, sure. That is at the bottom of the website, so it's public now. You can link on it and look at it.
I think Jonathan meant put the link into the chat, so I'll do that.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. So Sev, go ahead.
Ron, why have you ignored all my 4 solutions, which were well received by this group, and why have you not looked at my same matter which I made some 10 years ago, which does exactly what you're doing here? But you haven't looked at that at all. I'm angered that you've completely cut me out of this stuff.
Sev, I'm not. I think I do. I remember looking at something that you put together for NOAC that had a lot of.
You've not done Brian flakes. You've not done nanobubbles. You've not done Cedomizer ices. You've not done ice shields. All of those things which we've talked about.
So Sev, I think we've had this debate a number of times. I think our feeling is that those methods would be much more plausible for local regional cooling within, if you're talking about
your
20
opinion,
years.
It's not other people's opinions.
So anyway, that's a discussion we've had. So we put them to local regional, and we were planning to do another chart with local regional methods that would include those.
I think that this conversation illustrates why this whole process that you're applying, Ron, is just flawed. Because the only way to assess the merits of different strategies is through large-scale scientific study. It's not a matter of my opinion or your opinion about whether it would work. It's about having a process to actually test them rather than prejudge that process, which I feel that you've done.
So, Robert, I think we tried to, we invited all the folks that we thought were partisans, or we of course had the entire steering circle, and then we had everyone who we thought was working on a kind of global method, because we had already had this extensive discussion and debate with all of our cooling methods, and we put out in our paper that in our paper we have, I think,
it's just a flawed process,
6 or something. We have our global global, regional, and then we have our local, regional, local. And we did that division based on what we thought was realistically able to scale up to a global scale impact within 20 years. And so we in this chart, we basically are applying the same criteria that we used in the paper. We've added a few things because we've added the short-term greenhouse gas reduction of the short-term species. So we've expanded it to near-term cooling, not just to,
It's
what
just
we call
fingers in the wind and
climate cooling.
speculation, Ron. Like David Keith has said, an investment of $2 billion is needed to answer these questions. And so without
I'm
that
sorry,
David Keith has
Robert,
said,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the beginning of what you said.
I said it's just speculation. David Keith has said that an investment of $2 billion is required to answer these questions. And so in the absence of that investment, just having, personal opinions about what's going to work and what's not is neither here nor there.
Okay, well, I mean, this was the product of, we invited all these people. It was a long process. And this is what we came up with. So, we understand that there are going to be different opinions about these things. But, based on our understanding of the science and what is plausible, and as I said, we did a similar thing for the paper that, so it's not coming out of the blue.
You're
Mike,
not a scientist, Ron.
Go ahead.
You're not a scientist.
Can we let Mike respond? Because Mike is one of the, obviously the co-leader of this group. Mike, you're muted. Go ahead. You're still muted, Mike.
Well,
there we go.
What we also sort of wanted was for there to be published papers and model simulations of these kinds of things to show they would work, and that one could convince the scientific community of this. And there are quite a number of ideas that haven't. We had a list. I don't know if it's still on the website, of these other approaches where we listed, which included yours, as I recall, years and quite a number of others that have been suggested as possible approaches, but which it just wasn't clear how one would get to having a noticeable effect by 2050. So we didn't feel we could list everything. If we listed everything, there'd be 25 or 30 of these kinds of things. I think it's sort of the same problem that one has with trying to do, what Rob DeLotte and some of the groups here is talking about vegetation things, about putting out lots of trees and creating lots of clouds and doing it. I mean, it's a interesting proposal. He thinks he could get there, but there's no real indication that can be done or something like that. And so it's not that we need to have another page of ideas that have been suggested. And as Ron said, we were going to have a regional page, and I apologize for not getting that done in time. But there's a lot of things. I mean, if you look at marine cloud brightening as an example, it's hard, I think, realistically to see how that can do something global, where on the regional things, it's actually being tried, just like MIR is being tried. MIR also talks about, we've got it and we could do it, but the critical issue is how do you use reflective mirrors out over the ocean where 90% of the heat is getting into the ocean and building up.
You use nanobubbles. That's how you do it. You use nanobubbles. That's how you do it. That's putting your mirror.
That may be, but the idea of getting nanobubbles and getting it spread over the globe is an amazing challenge to do that.
I've already showed it to you in my recent HPAC talk, and no one's refuted it.
It's not that it won't work. It's can it be done on scale by within 20 years or something.
I've showed that also, and no one has come back to me with why it shouldn't. I'm really angry with you guys who've gone away and ignored most of what we've been a lot of us have been doing for the past 15 years. Just putting your own preferences in. You haven't been looking at all of them. You haven't allowed any of them to be assessed. That's what's got
Is it
my anger up.
is it presently even being demonstrated?
Yes, the buoyant flakes is being demonstrated by 5 different international groups. They're going to be publishing hopefully by the end of this year. But you've ignored that. You've ignored all the other ocean ion fertilization stuff. It's a partial thing, and it's not helpful. It's not bringing us together. It's not allowing us to let everything, all the methods, be assessed properly and then tested. You're just cherry picking.
Yeah, I think Sev's touched on something really important here, and that is bringing us together. HPAC has a checkered history of losing people because we haven't built consent. And so I suggest this is, in fact, a governance challenge. There are plenty of examples of well-established governance frameworks that work. Here's just one example. I met with Ted Rao just yesterday. But the point is, we have circles, and that is a trusted team of peers. This is decentralized power. We're linking circles together. Proposals are put forward, and they are reviewed and discussed. Consent is developed, and that's different than consensus. It's a lower bar. But if there are legitimate objections that take the circle away from its stated vision, mission, and aims, then that feedback comes in, and the proposals are revised. This is a governance challenge. This is well established for decades, and it's something that we can improve our governance, which I think is a prerequisite to getting major funding. So let's get our house in order, and I'd encourage this, and happy to help put it in place.
Okay, well, I think we are out of time, and I think it is an important discussion to continue. So let's do that and leave it there. Thank you all. I mean, I think these are really important questions, and we need to deal with them. Yes, Dennis.
Yes.
Closing notes. Yeah.
Just a final suggestion to carry on the discussion of the buoyant flakes and nanobubbles. I wonder if the working group that you and Mike co-chair could invite Sev to join you at your next meeting, and you can go into the entire ins and outs of the aspects of that set of solutions and work together with him to, first of all, give him the criteria that you used in making selections, give him the opportunity to respond to those criteria, to provide the justifications that he has developed and assembled, and then make a final decision on that. I think this is still a work in progress. This is not a finished, published product. It's just, a report that you've made on where you were. And what I'm gathering is that there were certain criteria used in defining the selection of and according to the judgment of the group, these methods did not achieve the minimum level of those criteria. But I think a dialogue with Sev and maybe other colleagues that Sev works with would be valuable in establishing whether or not the methods that he's proposed fit those criteria, or whether the criteria need to be adjusted in some way.
I think that's a very good suggestion, Dennis. We have, as Sev knows, we have had this discussion, in the past, and so it would be a continuation of that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if Sev would be willing to join us and present his views on these, I think we'd be glad to have a discussion. Why not?
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, I have to say, Seb, you know, you were a very valuable contributor to that paper. And I think, you know, yeah, I think you know, you made many very useful suggestions and contributions that moved that paper along. And so
Talking about
you
the
know,
open climate thing.
I don't want to diminish your, you know, I think you have played a very important, vital role in HPAC. And so, yeah, let's do that. If that, you know, if we will invite you to our next meeting. They're on usually on Wednesdays. It would be actually the next one would be that might be a little bit. I have this New York climate thing on Friday, but anyway, we'll figure out a time for that to happen. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, because
other-
I think,
Mike,
you know, we
go ahead.
did have this list of conceivable approaches. Originally, when the chart sounded art, it was longer, and we had that list on a page, and then Bruce didn't like the page, I think, and so it sort of got dropped. And
yeah, it was just a lot of work
and,
putting this together.
and we might, you know, and so yeah, so
yeah. You know, anyway.
There was a list
okay.
that was.
Thank you all. A good discussion, and you know, we'll as Dennis says, onward. That's right.